Today I will commemorate National Israel and the influence that it's had on my life. I will do this in 3 steps. First, I will explain how it is that I got to go to Israel. Second, I will explain why the land of Israel is so significant to me. And third, I'll explain what I took away from Israel that I think is more worthy of commemoration than anything else. It all began about 2 years ago when I was working for a property management company cutting down their trees. And I lost the keys to a company vehicle and was subsequently suspended. After not hearing from my boss for a week or two, I began to think I may not have a job at all, until out of the blue my boss showed up at my house. And he said that God wanted him to send me to Israel. This obviously caught me by surprise, but I knew he was a very serious and zealous Christian, and if he thought that that's what God wanted him to do, then that's what he was going to do. But the clincher was that I would have to pay for the trip, and so I could go live at his house. I didn't have to pay rent. I didn't have to buy my own groceries. I just had to take my paychecks and set them aside so that I could pay for the trip. And I didn't have anything else going on at the time, and who would disobey God's command to go have a vacation? So that's what I did, and I worked 6 or 7 days a week, cutting down trees and digging ditches for plumbers. And after about 2 months, I had enough money to go to Israel and stay there for about a month. The significance of Israel for me has to do with my Christian faith and my commitment to the Scriptures. The land of Israel is sort of the theater in which the drama of the Bible unfolds, both Old and New Testaments. And so Israel has a lot of bearing on the Christian faith. But I think for me, above anything else, it's the pedagogy of Jesus. Jesus has a teaching style that attempts to appeal to his listeners' knowledge of Israel's sacred geography. And I will give you a couple of examples. When Jesus wants to predict the apocalypse, he stands on a mountain east of Jerusalem called the Mountain of Olives. The reason why it's significant that he does it there as opposed to some valley or the plains or at a river is because this mountain had sort of an apocalyptic tradition behind it. In the Old Testament, the prophet Zechariah had predicted that when God comes and fights against the nations and pours out plagues on the earth, that the Mountain of Olives would be divided in half over an earthquake. Well, this led to that mountain kind of being an apocalyptic mountain. So when Jesus goes and he stands on the mountain and predicts the apocalypse, he's kind of walking in the tradition of Israel's prophets. He has chosen that location for a specific reason, and he would not have taught a sermon like that, like I said, in a valley or at a river or someplace. Another example might be the way that Jesus begins his ministry. He begins it at the Jordan River. The Jordan River is its own geographical symbol with its own meanings. This is where the nation of God began in the Old Testament during the days of Joshua, when he crossed the Jordan River with the 12 tribes, and they went into the land of Canaan to receive their inheritance. By Jesus beginning his mission at the Jordan River, he is saying something similar. He's effectively saying he's the new Joshua, and he is going to remake the people of God. And within his religious tradition, the only place where you can do that is at the Jordan River, because the geography is very important, and it has so many meanings. Similar things could be said about Jesus' time in the Judean desert, his time at the Sea of Galilee, his time in Jerusalem itself. All of these places have meanings. And Jesus does not just simply teach whatever's on his mind. He observes the land, he takes his cues from the land, and he teaches in a way consistent with the geographical symbolism around him, which I think is a very interesting approach to teaching. However, what I took away from Israel that's most important to me were not lessons on its geography. It was the people. You'll see that I'm wearing a Palestinian robe. I paid about 50 shekels for this, which is the equivalent of about 20 American dollars. And the Palestinian women make things like these because they don't have many sources of income, and they try to get by off of peddling their wares to tourists. When I went to Israel, I'd come from a political and religious culture that has a lot to say about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Oftentimes we have very nice things to say about the Jews who live in Israel, which is fine, and we have very mean things to say about the Palestinians. They're viewed with mistrust. They're viewed as being potential terrorists, all these things just because of their racial demographic, just because they're Arabs who live in the Palestinian territories. And I would have never conceded to it, but I really had that narrative in my mind when I went over there. But once I got there, I was convicted, and I began to see the Palestinian people for who they were. They were a people in pain. I've seen security walls that separated Palestinian farmers from their crops. I've seen how they were separated from their loved ones, and employees were separated from their jobs. And I heard stories from a Palestinian taxi driver who told me that some of the security checkpoints would even prevent Palestinians from going to the hospital if they were in need of medical care. I personally witnessed an officer go into a Palestinian shop and threaten the owner for no other reason than he was just a Palestinian Arab. And seeing that kind of overt racism and that kind of abuse of power just gave me a paradigm shift. It greatly convicted me. It made me realize that if Jesus were in modern day Israel, he wouldn't see the Palestinians as a bunch of terrorists. He would see them as victims in the human condition like anybody else. He would empathize with the suffering. I think as Christians, we have a divine imperative to emulate that approach to human suffering. We should suffer with those who are suffering. And I think before I went to Israel, I would not have seen the Palestinians in that way. I viewed them as subhuman terrorism sympathizers. And I think going there allowed me to emerge with a perspective that is much more Christian and less judgmental of these people just because of political propaganda or the fact that they belong to a certain racial demographic. And that is a valuable lesson to learn. And for that reason, more than anywhere else I've been, I commemorate Israel and the influence that it's had on my life.